Strategy Battle Gamers around the world, welcome to another GBHL YouTube channel video. Here with your GBHL channel host, GBHL James, bringing you a video on my lonesome, which normally is a little bit risky. Let's face it, there are a lot of things in this world that I'm probably not massively qualified to talk about, but the thing that I am going to talk about in this video I probably am a little bit qualified to talk about, and that's because this is going to be the very first of our Armies of the Lord of the Rings Middle-earth Strategy Battle Gaming army reviews. Now I guess the sensible way of doing this, the way that would make the most sense, would be to work through this as they appear, so to do the fellowship, to do everything else. But I think that probably as a channel team, especially now that we're a little bit more active with all of the new super cool stuff that's going on and all of the hype that's out there, I think that we would like to try and get together and kind of talk and spread that amongst the channel hosts. I know that I'm keen to do some more videos with Jamie, but there is something that I would love to talk about with you guys, and also a particular faction of which I have a bit of an affinity, that I am receiving lots of questions, lots of inbox messages on Facebook Messenger, even receiving emails and the like, because there seems to be an awful lot of excitement for the Horse Lords, for Rohan, that's right, and that of course is the faction that I guess I became known for using within Strategy Battle Game in the old edition. So what we're going to talk about in this video, we are going to do an army review for Rohan from the new book, which is going to be cool and exciting. Remember, this is a talking video, so I do suggest that you guys get your paints out, prepare for a long-winded discussion, because that's what I normally do. Maybe for those of you that want to pop this on when you're driving, it is a listening video. I'm not going to be showing you anything, so you know, you can always whack this up on your phones, get your headphones on and listen to this while driving as well. If you so wish, use it like a podcast. Okay, so I think the best place to start is actually to talk about Rohan in the old edition, its strengths, its weaknesses, what we tended to see. And for those of you that have maybe watched the GBHL podcast or my own channel, Hot Gates Gaming, you'll have heard me talk about things such as hierarchy of heroes and how to kind of spread your force with Rohan in the old edition. So I'm going to give you a little bit of historical context here before we dive into the new army list. And throughout this video, not only are we going to talk about individual profiles, but we're also going to talk about the kind of armies that I think that you're going to see going forwards with the Rohirrim, and types of airheads that other clerks of the Riddermarks out there are likely to field going forwards, because Rohan is definitely a faction that has received an awful lot of, I'm going to say, love, which it deserves, right? But also just a lot of attention generally, and I think with it being half of the new starter box for the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, then I think we're also going to see quite a lot of new players using it as well. And maybe a bunch of you out there are new players. Maybe you don't know who I am, maybe you don't know the history of the type of forces that I've built, maybe you didn't used to watch the old Get Buff Bat Reps and the like, and that's absolutely fine. So what I'm going to try and do is teach you guys out there, whether you are an experienced Rohirrim player or whether you're new to the game, the kind of paths that you can take going forward. So let's have a little bit of a discussion about the history of Rohan in terms of Strategy Battle Game and the way that we saw it. So when I first started getting involved in the game, which isn't that long ago in the big scheme of things, which was about 5 and a bit years ago, the forums were quite downbeat on Rohan, in the sense that there was definitely a feeling that Rohan couldn't be played how people wanted to play Rohan. So when people think about the Horse Lords, the Mighty Horse Lords, they think about Pelennor Fields, they think about this massive, you know, this massive dynamic charge that completely sweeps away the enemy. And you know, when people were trying to play all-mounted Rohan, that just isn't how cavalry works in Strategy Battle Game, full stop, really. So what people would tend to find is that those models with the big bases would very quickly become effectively very expensive, easy to surround and trap infantry models that could go down pretty easily. So when I got involved, I absolutely loved playing I love the aesthetic of Rohan, love the history of Rohan, love Rohan in the books, love Rohan in the movies, and a big part of my early stages of strategy battle game was, I guess, trying to find something that really worked, a kind of formula, as it were. And what that did involve, it did mean that you had to play a very kind of patient style of game. So if we're going to discuss the kind of style, you know, I guess a lot of people would say that I skirted around a lot. There's a lot of the skirmish side of things, because one of the strengths of the old Rohan armies in particular was the access to 100% bows and the ability to be able to abuse the bow limit. Now, this wouldn't necessarily win you games by itself. And the reason for that is that there were still a lot of things out there that were down shoot it. You've only got strength 2 bows. A lot of the time, if you're moving and shooting, you're hitting on 5s. So it wasn't necessarily a plan that you could rely upon. But what it would do in some instances, at various points, at different points levels, is it would kind of force the issue with your opponent, force your opponent to make mistakes, and that would give you some great opportunities to kind of, I guess, charge in or isolate parts of enemy armies, particularly if they made the mistake of splitting up against you, and you could push 100% of your army onto, you know, a third of their army or 50% of their army, and massively sway things in your favour. There was nothing more catastrophic as a Rohirrim player of trying to do the old kind of Pelennor charge, you know, it's where you just charge into a line, and a lot of the time, you know, you've got shield wall supported by spears, you know, sometimes pikes as well. And that would be absolutely catastrophic for any cavalry player in the old game, unless you're incredibly lucky, particularly with the subsequent heroic move-offs, which was another one of the issues when it came to running any kind of cavalry army. When you try to do the charge, was trying to ensure, ultimately, when you're cavalry, you want to charge in when you have when your opponent has 1 priority, so you've lost priority. So you put yourself in a position where they've done all of their moves, and then you can charge in and use your greater movement to pick the fights that you want to fight. And effectively, when you're doing that in strategy battle game across the board, it's not necessarily just with cavalry. What you're ultimately trying to do is put yourself in a situation where you're putting the odds in your favour. It's not just about chucking everything into everything. It's looking and going, how many dice am I going to roll versus how many dice are they going to roll in any situation that I can create. And the good thing about obviously doing that when you have lost priority is that they have no way of countering that afterwards. So they're not going to mob you after and start putting things back in their favour. And I guess the key thing was to make the most of your heroic combats, make sure that your might could get into some good positions, because then inevitably what would happen subsequently is the priority roll and then the heroic move off. So if you won priority, your opponent would almost certainly, if they had the might, unless you did great with your heroic combats and were able to get rid of their might, they would call a heroic move, and of course you have to call a heroic move because of the benefits that you get for charging, all of the extra dice, the knockdown bonuses and the like. So I guess one of the big tactics that I kind of employed when I did go in for that charge was making sure that you didn't fully commit everything, that you only put in enough to do enough damage with your heroes, with your sort of higher attack troops, higher strength troops, which in my case was normally Sons of Ale. Normally brought you know, a good handful of those, normally about a third of the thought force. Was normally, oh no, sorry, a third of a half, so I'll talk you through that in a second. And you try and get those in, you try and cause as much damage as you possibly could. You would still go for the heroic move off because those charge bonuses are great, but if you lost it, the good thing was that you had left some riders back to be able to countercharge the situation if they had won that heroic move off. And that was one of the kind of key tactics to charging in with cavalry, and that will still be the case going forwards. Now, in terms of the build of the Rohirrim that you would tend to see, I think you saw 2 kinds of builds when it came to using Rohan competitively in the old edition. You would see the kind of way that I did, which was kind of covering all bases, being pretty versatile. So I would try and abuse the bow limit advantage that riders of Rohan give you. and I would try and make sure that that filled up about half of my force, depending on the points values, because that would normally put you in a position where if you add your manoeuvrability and your ability to pick where you're shooting on your opponent's line, you know, because you can effectively shift your shooting so that they can't get all of their bows against what you're shooting with, and you can make sure that you're getting all of your bows onto fewer bows of theirs. 50% of using your force with the abuse of your bow limit usually gave you a good advantage of that. And then the other half I would try and break down, normally would break down into kind of thirds if you looked at points, which would be a third of that half would be Sons of Ale, a third would be usually because of points and the like, maybe a couple of Royal Guard, Banner and the like, and a third would be Outriders. Of course, the strength of Outriders was that they're great for holding objectives, they've got a better shoot value and the like. They're really kind of good late game players. You tend to hold them back and jump on objectives with them, and all the while they're doing a better shooting job than the Riders of Rohan can ever do. Sons of Ale, absolutely fantastic. Now, one thing that Sons of Ale did in the old edition of the game was they were pretty forgiving when it came to that losing the heroic move off, getting countercharged. So again, one of the big weaknesses of cavalry would, if you lose that and you get charged before you've been able to charge, you are just a big expensive infantry model that can have lots of infantry models around it, trapping it and putting way more attacks in. And Sons of Ale, with a defense 6 and the 2 attacks, they tended to be a little bit more forgiving, you know, if you did lose that charge. Also, having the 3 attacks on the charge, rolling 6 dice on a knockdown with strength 4, access to piercing strike, they could also make sure that on that initial charge, when you can pick your fights, that you are really getting the damage in, which is so important when you do make the move to charge in with your Rohirrim, which you're not always trying to push from the start. Remember, you are trying to skirmish your opponent and pull them out of position and the like before that. Royal Guard, you know, were fine, and they weren't fantastic in the old edition, but I guess Bodyguard was pretty useful, and that kind of made up the makeup of your troop side of force. And then there was very much a hierarchy of heroes, which is absolutely massively changed going into the new edition for the Rohirrim, and I guess the must-take hero in Rohan 1.0, as it were, was Erkenbrand. Now, Erkenbrand, not only is he a fantastic model, but he had some brilliant rules. So the fact that he could bring Horn of the Hammerhand would give +2 courage across the board. This meant that even your lowly Rider of Rohan was the courage of an elf. More importantly, if you did get to a horrible situation where you broke and the like, your heroes were massively buffed up as well. And he was fantastic in that regard, but that doesn't even take into account I guess the better thing for him was that he was still a Fight 5 hero, and Fight 5, you know, is kind of the creme de la creme for the Rohirrim in terms of fight value. But he also brought 3 might to the table. He was a defense 7 hero with 3 might, and he could also buff troops, so you could spend a point to buff a Rider of Rohan into being a Westfold Red Shield, and a Westfold Red Shield jumped up to Fight 4. Now, Fight 4 is kind of the place the place that you really want to be. Fight 3, when there's just so much Fight 4 out there, is a very kind of tough existence. When your whole plan, I suppose, relies on trying to roll more dice when you get in there, if you've not got a fight value advantage, your plan of I guess weighing yourself to win those fights, you're not really in charge of that. So the Westfold Red Shield upgrade was huge in that regard, and as such, Erkenbrand, it was cheap as well, 75 points. He was always kind of like your go-to hero. Then after that, you had the option between, you could go for Eowyn, depending on what points value. Eowyn, Knight of the Pelennor, was your beefy hero. He was Rohan's beefiest hero in that sense, with all the 3s in all the right places. Armoured horse, you know, strength 5 on the charge, which was really good. Defense 7, just an absolute beast. If you could afford to get him in, you did, or you'd go the other way, where if you were strict on theme and the like, you might take Marshal of the Riddermark buffed up, but undoubtedly for his points, Eowyn the Young was just so much better with the 12-inch moving horse, throwing spears chucked in there, you know, legendary hero, which is just so great in a Rohirrim army, which is massively reliant on getting its charges off. The chance to get free might is just an absolute winner. So you'd normally see Eowyn the Young, and then Eowyn, you know, cheap hero, which allows you to bring more riders. Remember, if you've got a cavalry army, you can have a smaller army. So an access to a cheap hero. She brought 2 mights to the table. She only had 1 attack and the like, but that's not what she was there for. She was just bringing cheap might and an extra fight 5, and you'd normally pair her up with a Son of Ale when she was charging in anyway, so she could really do her stuff. And those were kind of like the 3, I guess, the 3 key heroes, and then after that, you know, the kind of just whittle away. If you were bringing an infantry Rohan army, then people would say, you know, make sure you bring Grimbold and the like, but he wasn't that fantastic. And that's where Rohan were really. So that was one type of Rohan army. The other type that you would see really was kind of spamming out the rides of Rohan, really abusing the 100% bows, and maybe coupling that with an offensive wizard like Saruman. That was another way of doing it, where it is just pure range power, whittle your enemy down, and then I suppose when you've got the opportunity, then you can kind of jump in and throw all of those dice. Those really the 2 kind of Rohirrim armies that you mainly saw. We did see a few all-hero Rohan armies, because Rohan, one of its strengths is it does have access to cheap might, relatively. And we did see that sporting around every now and again. Daniel Entwistle was one of those people who did that, and I did it a couple of times as well. And it's a pretty decent army. And that's really what we saw with Rohirrim in 1.0. So I guess what you guys want to know is what's going on with Rohan when it comes to the armies of the Lord of the Rings. So we're going to start off and we're going to go through. Now, what were people's main gripes with Rohan in the previous edition? I guess the main gripes were the fact that there was never really any competitive... there was never a compelling case for bringing the likes of Theoden in a competitive army. You know, his lack of will was a massive problem. Rohan has got some did have, and still has, although they've been weakened quite a lot, it had some very hard counters, particularly as you started going up into higher points level games. So Rohan would massively struggle when it was coming up against enemy wizards or monsters. So things like Fell Beasts were an absolute killer for it, and of course, you know, especially as you start going up in points, but you still saw them at lower points. Fell Beasts were massively prevalent in the meta, and that was a huge problem. The 12-inch movement of the flying monster, plus the ability to hurl, you know, and knock you off your horses, was an absolute killer. Other things that were really bad for Rohan to come up against, I guess, were Legolas auto-hitting hero horses before you've even got in and been able to make a charge. That was pretty devastating. And then of course Sorcerer's Blast was a killer as well, and being able to blast from a distance. So those were pretty hard counters, and things that you saw a lot of in the competitive meta as you started going 600 points plus, which is why I always did best with Rohan when it was 500 points. I won the Beacons of Chester with an all-mounted Rohan force. 500 points, and I won the Kingdoms of Men category as well at the GT. Again at that lower points level. I think that was a 600 points event, so I think I brought some infantry for that one as well, but that tended to be where I did best. I did quite well in some East Grinstead ones and some other ones as well, got a few seconds and thirds. So I guess the inability to bring heroes that you want to bring and still feel like you can, you can face up and do okay was a big problem, and also the lack of the ability to play the Rohirrim how you want to play them from the Pelennor, right? You want to charge in, you want to smash things over. You know, that's something that definitely didn't happen in the old edition of the game. Okay, so let's look at Rohan in 2.0. Well, they have massively improved, you know, across the board. Now, it's not just in isolation, things that we see when we look at the profiles of each individual hero and warrior in the book, because there are some things which are worse. but it's also when you look at the rules in general. So monsters, Hurl is nowhere near as good, Sorcerous Blast isn't as good, and this is going to be a huge help to the Rohirrim player going into the next edition, because those were big problems, like big problems. So the fact that those have kind of been nerfed a little bit means that the emergence of the Rohirrim player at a higher points level is something that we might actually see. So let's talk about the army bonus first of all. They've got the army bonus, Ride for Ruin and the World's Ending. Friendly Rohan cavalry models gain +1 strength on a turn in which they charge. +1 strength on a turn in which they charge. Now this is really cool, and again it's to try and symbolise that ploughing forward of the Rohirrim, going through and just being able to smash through ranks. Now, is it what Rohan needs to make it more competitive? Probably not. Probably not. And the reason I say that is, don't get me wrong, there's a big difference between being sort of strength 3 and 4 and 4 and 5, depending on what defences you're coming up against. But killing things often wasn't the problem that the Rohirrim had when they're getting their charges off, because you're rolling lots of dice. So even a rider of Rohan charging in wins its fight, you're rolling 4 dice, and against defense 6, sure, you know, you've got 4 dice needing 6s. That's not terrible. Now what this does is it gives you a situation where up against defense 6, you're automatically in a situation where you're rolling 4 dice and you're able to get, you're looking for 5s, and of course that's a much greater chance, so that's pretty useful. Now if you combine that with, before in the old version of the game, another thing that the Rohirrim had access, and lots of access to, was axes. Naturally, on the models anyway, so you're not having to cheese it up and glue them on, and that meant that you always had that option there, that, do you know what, you know, I've charged in, I've got more dice here, there's a few others on it, I'll piercing strike when I'm up against that defense 6, because I know that even going up by 1 is going to increase my chances massively of killing what I need to kill. And I guess what this does is it kind of means that you're not having to rely on that as much against, particularly for a lot of your riders and Royal Guard, of which we're going to see a lot more of, which I'll explain down the line, but particularly against your defense 4, defense 6 and defense 8 troops, of which there are plenty of, right? You know, it's not going to be as much of a help against defense 3, 5 and 7 for your troops, but that it will help the heroes out in that regard as they go up from strength 4 to strength 5 in particular. And it also means that against those you still consider piercing striking, because piercing striking, if you win, you know that you're getting that +1 strength to make the difference and increase your odds massively. So you know, in that regard you kind of know where you are a little bit more when you're charging. So it is going to be, it is a big thing, I think, particularly for the heroes. The strength 5 on the charge for lots of them. Eowyn going up to strength 4 could be a big deal if you're bringing her along. So a decent army bonus, and I think one which when people look at on face value they think, wow, that's a really strong one. You know, people are less excited when they hear things like +1 courage for an army, even though that can be huge, because it can, if they've got access to Gandalf the White, talking about Gondor here of course, Gandalf the White is not failing a courage test, and he's got, you know, stand fast and all that kind of stuff, so your troops aren't running away. You know, when people see things like +1 strength, that's when they get excited, and rightly so. I think it's a nice thematic army bonus. So let's start off with the main man himself. We've got Theoden. Okay, now Theoden, King of Rohan, he is 75 points. So if we look at, we've got the Old Kingdoms of Men book here, so we can do some direct comparisons, which is always good fun. Let's have a little look. So Theoden in the old book, he actually started off at being 65 points. So let's compare the stat lines. So new Theoden, fight 5, old Theoden, fight 5, both 4+ shoot value, both strength 4, both defense 5 basic, both 2 attacks basic, both 2 wounds basic, both courage 5 basic. And then here's the money. So Theoden, King of Rohan, goes up to having 3 might. This is huge. This is absolutely massive. Rohan needs might. It needs might because it needs to be able to pull off heroic moves. So the fact that he goes up to 3 might is massive. Love that. Now his main problem in the old edition, 0 will. He goes up to 3 will here. Now it doesn't. There is a special rule which counters that in a really themey way, which I think is great. I think it's so cool, and we see quite a lot of this in the new army book. But the fact that he goes up to 3 will here is massive. Now he does go down to 1 fate. He is a hero that died after all, whereas before he was 2 fate. So in that sense, I guess he's a little bit easier to kill. Now in terms of war gear and options, he starts off with armour. But in this, his sword is named, his sword Erkenbrand. Now it's an active thing, so it can get turned off if he gets transfixed and like he can't use the ability. But Erkenbrand is a sword. Remember, all profiles in the new edition of the game, it lists exactly what war gear they've got. So he's got a sword. Additionally, Theoden may use the feint special strike even if his fight value is lower than his opponent's. So this is great. So this is just like feint in the old edition. It doesn't have to be the same or more than to feint. He can basically assure that against somebody who is a higher fight value, he's always re-rolling ones to wound, which is cool. Now the heroic actions that Theoden can take in the new edition of the game, he can heroic march. So this is of course on top of your standard heroic move, heroic shoot and heroic combat. Heroic move and heroic combat are going to be the ones that you are mainly using his might for, but he can heroic march, which is going to be great for sort of getting in the face of the enemy, on which a Rohan army is going to want to do these days. I have to say, it wants to do that. Means you can get in the face of your enemies quicker, which is great. He can also heroic strike. Heroic strike is pretty limited these days, so seeing a heroic strike on there, that's really cool, especially because Rohan is hard capped at 5. So the fact that it's got heroes that can strike up even more, especially because we're going to see a lot of those beefy heroes around. I think we're going to see a lot of Glorfindels, a lot of Aragorns, a lot of Elven heroes that are higher fight value. It's quite cool that he can do that. Also gives him the edge versus ring wraiths, which is really nice. And he's also got heroic challenge, which is of course very thematic for Theoden. Now he's got the same options as he had previously. He can have an armoured horse 15 points, a horse for 10 points, heavy armour for 5 and a shield. And of course you're probably going to see Theoden most of the time always having one or the other of the mounts depending on what you can fit in points wise. But he's also going to have his heavy armour and shield almost all the time because he's a hero of legend. Because he's a hero of legend, that means that you're going to want to keep him as safe as you possibly can. You're going to want him to be defense 7 and keep him safe. Okay, so in terms of special rules, previously he just had Expert Rider. He's got Expert Rider still, but he's also got Horse Lord, and Horse Lord is something that we see on all of the Rohirrim heroes. So let's have a little look and see what Horse Lord does and what situations that we think it will be used. So Horse Lord, you also see it in some other profiles. It's not just the Rohirrim heroes, and Horse Lord is passive, so this just happens regardless. Now whilst this model is mounted, they may choose to expend their own fate points to prevent wounds caused to their mounts. Now this is an incredibly risky strategy. It's not something that you're necessarily going to have as a go-to every single time, but what it is going to be really useful for is Rohan is going to be, your Rohan heroes are going to be castrated if their horses are getting knocked from under them before they're able to do effectively what you're paying them the points to do. So what does a Rohan hero want to be able to do? A Rohan hero wants to be able to get in, charge, heroic combat, charge again into a position where the might is going to be very useful for the subsequent heroic move-offs, and try and kill as much as it can through that heroic combat, hoping to kill sort of 3, 4 or maybe even 5 if lucky models. 3 or 4 is pretty good. If you've got a bunch of them doing that, that can third. If you've got 3 of them doing that, that can third an opponent's army pretty quickly. So it's that kind of heroic combat. So if you're getting a situation where you're not quite there and your horse gets sniped from underneath you, it is one of those where you look at it and go, my Rohan hero hasn't quite been able to do what he's going to do. He's going to be much less effective without his horse. I might just do this because I know that next turn I'm going to get the charge off. Very risky to do with Theoden. He is probably going to be your leader if you're bringing him, and trust me, you are probably going to be bringing Theoden in the new edition. Okay, because it's not just his improved stat line that attracts us here. Your Theoden's probably going to be coming in at 95 or 100 points. when you take him. So he's not a cheap hero. He's not an expensive hero, but he's not a cheap hero. He's kind of that mid-level, you know, on the upper echelons of the mid-level. Now, he's got that cool rule that we were talking about before. The will of men is easily corrupted. So if Grima Wormtongue is within 6 inches of Theoden, King of Rohan, then Theoden is reduced to a fight value of 3 and down to 1 attack. Additionally, you may not declare heroic actions and may not use will points. That is so cool. That is so cool. So immediately, you know, what's one of the armies that we see a lot of out there? We see a lot of Isengard, and especially if we're getting new people coming into the game, Isengard is a really easy access army. It's an army that we see a lot of because it's strong, and you can get hold of it everywhere. You can get Isengard for super cheap normally. You know, there's always tons of Urukai on eBay and the like, and you know, because they've got fight 4, strength 4, lots of access to defense 6. You know, they're pretty solid. Access to shamans, all that kind of stuff. Their heroes are good and quite cheap. You know, we're going to see a lot of Isengard. So in an era when we're going to see a lot of Rohan as well, Grima is a very hard counter. So I think that the Rohirrim player's got to be getting prepared to either at higher points level allow in a wizard. Would you do that? I'm not sure, you know. Like, you might do, but you'd have to go Gandalf the White if you want to keep your +1 strength. You know, looking at things, looking at the alliance matrix, and he's expensive, so you're going to massively hit your numbers if you do that, or you're going to be sacrificing a couple of your riders just to pin that Grima in place while you go and do what you need to do and get as far away with Theoden as you can, because that is a big nerf if Grima can get around. But super cool, even as a Rohan player, I love that. So he's also got 4th and Fear No Darkness, which is an active rule, such as the rousing speech given by the King of Rohan, that his riders will charge into the face of death for him. So Theoden stand fast at 12 inches rather than 6. That's obviously great. That's exactly what we want to see. So yeah, that's super cool. Now Theoden's main strength isn't going to be, he's a hero legend, so he can take 18 cavalry models, which is a big deal. I think that you can fall into a trap with the different heroic tiers of, as a result of being able to take more troops at lower points levels, taking less heroes. But remember, might is so important for the Rohirrim. You don't want to really be going in at low points levels with less than 8. I would say, you know, 8 is a kind of good level. If you've got anything less than that, you know, 6 or 7 probably isn't going to cut it across the full course of a game. So you've got to be wary of kind of falling into that trap. But Theoden is pretty decent, but I think the main area that we're going to see him and why we're going to see more of him is because of what he does for certain troops and their special rules, which we'll come to as we get through the review. Okay, so that is Theoden so far. I hope you like the new Theoden profile. I do. Okay, I love the new Theoden model as well. A very hard one to live up to, because the old Theoden sculpts are incredible. Like, some of my favourite models to paint, those Theodens that I've got over there, absolutely beautiful. But I am looking forward to having some helmed Theoden on foot, helmed Theoden on horse. I love the mounted model in particular. So next up we have got Theodred. Now Theodred has gone up by 10 points. He was 70 in the old book. He's now 8. He's now at 80, and let's see how his stat line has changed. So still fight 5, still 4+ shoot value, still strength 4, still defense 6. He had 2 attacks previously, and he's gone up to 3 attacks. So that is, you know, that's going to make a difference. 4 attacks on the charge. He's going to be a bit of a killing machine. He's still only got 2 wounds, and he's courage 5. But what he's also gained as well, he's got 3 might. Again, very important for Rohan. 3 will, but he's also gained a point of fate. He's got 1 point of fate rather than having none, and that is a big difference. We've got a little bit more of a survivable Theodred. So not only is he more likely to win his fights, more likely to kill, but he's also less likely to die if he does lose. Now, he previously, as options, he had the options of horse, bow, shield, throwing spears. He doesn't have the option for a bow here. He just has horse, shield, and throwing spears. He is armed with heavy armour and a sword. No special sword or anything there. So that does mean that if he's lower fight value, you can feint, obviously. Same or higher, you can feint. And heroic actions that he's got heroic strike. So it's for the same reasons. I think that's really good for Theoden, really good on any Rohan hero when fight 5 is seemingly a cap. When everybody doesn't have access to heroic strike, this is huge for the Rohirrim. He's also got heroic challenge, again very very thematic. Now he's also got expert rider and horse lord, so you're going to be able to protect getting him into battle a little bit easier. But he's also got a special rule added to him, which is reckless charge. Having never experienced defeat in battle, Theoden's overconfidence will one day see his downfall. Very cool. Theodred must charge an enemy model if he's able to do so. Additionally, on a turn in which he charges, Theodred may re-roll any failed to wound rolls during the fight phase. That is cool. So if he can charge an enemy model, he must charge an enemy model. And to be fair, once he's getting in there, you're going to be wanting to charge him. So if he can, he must. It doesn't say that he must charge the closest model either, so you've still got a bit of leeway there. If he can charge though, he must, and you're going to be wanting to do that with him, because if he can re-roll, if he's re-rolling failed to wound rolls during the fight phase, this dude is going to be great on that whole hero charging in, heroic combat, kill everything, straight into something else, kill. He's going to really help knock down those numbers. So Theodred, heir of Rohan, is he worth taking? Absolutely. Whereas previously with the 0 fate, 2 attacks and 2 wounds, he did slip out of the hierarchy of heroes a little bit, and you're going to probably take him at 95 points most of the time. You might chuck throwing spears on if you've got spare points, but I doubt you're going to build your plan around that. So next up we have got Eomer, Marshal of the Riddermark. Now there is no Knight of the Pelennor here, we have got one Eomer profile, so let's see what they've done with Eomer. So Eomer is a hero of valour, just like Theodred is, so they can take 15 troops with them, which is could be pretty useful. Now Eomer has got his fight 5, so we don't have that fight 6 that we maybe always dreamed of, but bear in mind that he also has access to heroic strike. So in the new edition, access to heroic strike is great because not everybody has it. He is strength 4. He's defense 6 base. He's got 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5, 3 might, 3 will, 3 fate. So it's basically the Knight of the Pelennor profile, if you add the shield to it, which is really cool. Now he's got his heavy armour and a sword, and as options he's got the armoured horse option that you saw with the Knight of the Pelennor. He's also got the horse option, shield, and he does have the throwing spear option. Again, most of the time you're probably going to see Eomer at 115 or 120. So he's not cheap, but he's a bit cheaper than what you saw with Knight of the Pelennor, and just as good. Now he doesn't have the devastating charge, but of course if you're taking a pure Rohan army, he's got strength 5 on the charge anyway, for the +1 strength for the army bonus, so pretty decent. He's also got expert rider and horse lord. Get horse lord on someone like Eomer is huge. You want Eomer to be charging, just like Theodred, you want them to be charging. When he's got 3 wounds, 3 fate, Eomer is the kind of candidate that you would use Horse Lord, the special rule for. Someone snipes off his horse, you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna, excuse my language. You're like, I'm definitely gonna use that. I'm definitely gonna use that fate point. So yeah, great. Now he's also got a bit of a down overall here. He's got, if Theoden or Eowyn are in the same force as Eomer, and either or both are slain for the remainder of the game, Eomer adds +1 to all wounds during the fight phase. Additionally, for the remainder of the game, Eomer must charge if able to do so. To be fair, as a downer, it doesn't say closest model. He's not going to get kited or anything. In situations where he was your leader, let's say that you did bring him and Theoden wasn't there and you had him as your leader, then yeah, that could be a bit of a problem. But in that case, you probably wouldn't make him your leader. If you're taking that very, very, very aggressive Rohan army, and you've got a Theodred, you've got an Eomer, you probably would push that towards Theodred. And I say that, both of them will be doing the charging, so maybe not. But you know what I mean. You want this guy to be charging. So if he's charging, he's getting +1 to wound. You actually start looking at it and going, well, I don't particularly mind if Eowyn dies, you know, in order to be able to get that, because my Theoden, my Aemma is going to absolutely wreck face. If he's strength 5 on the charge and +1 to wound, you know, he's going to be killing all sorts. So what do I think about this combined Aemma profile? I absolutely love it. The fact that he's got heroic strike, he's also got access to heroic strength as well, which is one of the new heroics. So, you know, he can be a monster killer. You know, let's say Theoden or Eowyn dies, he gets the charge off on something and he declares a heroic strength. This, you know, he can absolutely wreck face on high defense targets, and that's probably where he's going to see the greatest amount of play, I think. In terms of a hierarchy, if you can get him in, you know, he's not cheap, but if you can get him in, he's definitely Rohan's beefiest single piece in that sense. Now next up we come to somebody who has changed an awful lot, and that is Eowyn. So Eowyn's base points have gone from being 30 to 40. She's a minor hero, so she can't take many troops, so you're not going to get that situation where you're bringing her in order to be able to take more cavalry. She can't do that, and I guess that makes sense. She didn't lead loads of Rohirrim in the movies or the books or the like. How's her profile changed? Well, she's still fight 5, thank goodness. She's strength 3, defense 3. She's gone up to having 2 attacks instead of 1. This is a big deal. Big deal. 1 attack was a main downfall, and that's the only change looking across the board. She's still got the 2s for might, will, fate, which is fantastic. She's armed with a sword, and she can bring a horse. Now previously her horse was only 6 points. It's gone up to 10 points, which as it should be, and that really reflects the fact that she's, I guess, being 2 attacks, the horse is worth that a little bit more. An armour, shield, and she can take throwing spears. Now what this does mean is that instead of your 46 point Aemma that you used to see a lot of, that 46 point Eowyn becomes a 60 point Eowyn, which is quite a bit more expensive when you aren't bringing a bunch of troops. So I think that what happens with Eowyn is that she actually descends down the ranking, as it were, the hierarchy of heroes when you start looking at the other heroes that you might bring, purely because, you know, you might do, especially if you're then pairing her with other heroes such as Theoden, who can bring a lot more to kind of make up for that. But really, the fact that she's not bringing an awful lot of troops to the table and she's a lot more expensive, you've really, you know, she's not the kind of auto include that I guess that I definitely made her previously. And again, and that's what you want. You don't want auto includes all the time. She's an expert rider. She's got horse lord, and she's got a special rule: I shall kill you if you touch him, which is an active special rule. If Theoden is in your force and is slain, place a 25mm marker where he fell. Eowyn must move directly towards this marker during each of her move phases if she's able to. Once Eowyn has moved within 3 inches of this marker, she may not willingly move more than 3 inches away from it for any reason for the remainder of the game. Additionally, whilst within 3 inches of the marker, Eowyn becomes fearless and must re-roll any failed to wound rolls. In addition, she also receives a bonus of +1 to wound when making strikes against the model that slew Theoden. So she, again, a really themey special rule. She becomes a little bit of a beast when that happens. It does restrict you massively. There might be certain scenarios where that's pretty useful, you know, like a hold ground or something where you want to kind of stay in an area. You know, I guess a beefy Eowyn once Theoden's died is pretty cool. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you know, there are a lot of limitations on that. She's definitely not the auto include that she used to be, but very cool. I'm really pleased with some of the changes there. So next up we've got, she's also got heroic resolve, heroic strike, again more access to heroic strike, which is great. Heroic resolve, which protects her against magic, which makes a whole bunch of sense considering what she does to the Witch King. But she's also got heroic strength as well, which is nice to see. The fact that she's going up to strength 4 from the Rohan charge bonus, and the fact that she's got that as well, means that she can pack a punch as well, and the fact that she's able to do that, when you've seen, you know, a lot of people, when they matched up Eowyn and the Witch King in the previous edition of the game, you'd be like, well, how is Eowyn able to win this? You know, how can she win this? And Eowyn's actually got a decent chance now, because she can heroic strike, she can heroic strength, you know, she can put the pain in if she needs to. Okay, so next up we move to Meriadoc, Knight of the Mark. He's an independent hero as he was before, still 25 points. His profile is exactly the same. The thing that they have changed here is that he doesn't have the Horn of the Riddermark here. So you can't use Knight of the Mark to buff your hobbits and the like, which is fine. He does have access to Heroic Strike, so again it's that whole thing of being able to I guess replicate him being able to do something to the Witch King and combat him. He does have the Elven Cloak option, which is only 5 points now instead of 10. Access to a pony. Of course, ponies have to take a courage test when you're charging now. And he does have access to a shield. He's got resistance to magic. Resistance to magic is obviously a huge buff now, being a mini fortify spirit. And he's still got throw stones. So where do I think you're going to see Meriadoc, Brandybuck, Knight of the Mark in the new Rohan armies? I think we're going to see him like we did see him before, which is, because he's not changed hugely, you're probably going to bring him if, one, you're doing a really themey force, a themey Rohirrim force, which involves him, but you're probably going to see him more if you take an all-hero Rohirrim, hero force, because he can really be your might battery when you put him next to Gamling with the Royal Standard of Rohan. You know, you use him to do your heroic moves, and he's always down to 0, goes back up, heroic move, goes back up, heroic move, and he basically becomes your heroic move battery, so that the other heroes can really focus on heroic combats, winning the fights, killing what they need to kill with their mights in the all-hero force. So that is Meriadoc, Brandybuck. We move on to Erkenbrand. So Erkenbrand, remember, was, you know, the must-take if you were going to be competitive in the previous edition. Or so people thought. Now he's a hero of fortitude, so he can still take 12. He has gone up. He's gone up by 10 points, you know, which makes absolute sense. He was too cheap before. So he's gone up to 75 points from 65. His stat line across the board is exactly the same, which again was a very strong stat line. And in isolation, you know, if we don't then go on to, if all of the other Rohirrim profiles hadn't changed, you'd still look at that for the 3 might and the fact that he's still relatively cheap. Now Horman Hanahand, it's got a very key change to it. This is a Warhorn that has +2 courage rather than 1. However, this Warhorn only affects friendly Rohan models. So with the Rohan keyword, that's great, because, you know, let's face it, we want the army bonus anyway, right? So we're going to be bringing just the Rohirrim. And I think that that's a really good little change. It means that you're not seeing him dropped in to break other forces, and that's the type of thing that we want to see. So a nice change there. That +2 courage is still huge, particularly for heroes and their standfasts. But it also means that your humble rider of Rohan is the courage of an elf still. So very, very, very good. Now the heroic actions that he can bring, he's got heroic march and heroic strength, so pretty decent. Access to heroic march. Something that you might actually use on a hero like Erkenbrand, and he's still got the option of the horse, which is 10 points. Now this is the main area where he's changed, and where his position, when you combine that with what Theoden does and with the type of army that you're likely to bring, this is where Erkenbrand starts to slide out of your consciousness a little bit, not wholly, but a little bit. So if your army includes Erkenbrand, you can upgrade any number of riders of Rohan in his warband to Westfold Red Shields at the cost of 1 point per model. Westfold Red Shields count as being in range of a banner if Erkenbrand is within 3 inches. Now I am a big fan of banner buffs for a cavalry army, because they protect against not only trying to ensure when you do get the charge that you get that win, but if you don't get the charge off, you know, and you're back down to 1 dice, the ability to be able to roll that dice can be a game changer. So I'm a big fan of that. Now remember, Westfold Red Shields now, you're only going to be able to do it for up to a maximum of 12 riders. So just the ones that are in his warband, so it's less good in that sense, and that means that you're paying up to 12 points for a banner, for basically a banner effect that's only going to affect up to 12 models. Sure, it's cheap, but even 12, because it's 3-inch range. If it was a 6-inch range, I think that you might see more of it, maybe. But the fact that it's a 3-inch range means it's going to be really hard to affect all the models that you kind of want it to affect, because they're going to be, you know, have to be really kind of tightly clumped around him. I'd have to work out how you do this on a charging line, but I just don't think you can do it. He's only ever going to be able to affect 4 on charge, maybe, like, you know, if it's a straight line. So that's not going to be as great. He's an expert rider and horse lord, but yeah, I think that the main area where Erkenbrand falls away ever so slightly here is with that. Now, so when are we going to see Erkenbrand? Well, I think he does dip down the hierarchy heroes, and a big part of that is going to be the troops that we're more likely to see, and the fact that Theoden is probably going to be so prevalent because of Theoden's ability to buff Riders of Rohan for fight value and buff Royal Guard for fight value as well. So with you not getting the buff to fight value from Erkenbrand, we're probably not going to see as much of this guy. He's still good, he's still decent, a +2, but because of something I'm going to come on to later on, I think that we're going to see a little bit less of him. There are areas when you would see him. If you take a Rider of Rohan, like an army which is pretty much Riders of Rohan, then you might take him along, because they don't have bodyguard, so the +2 courage is going to be a big difference for them. But yeah, I'm happy-ish with the change. I think if the banner effects had been 6 inches, I think that would be better, maybe. Okay, so next up we have got Gamling. Now Gamling is again a hero that you only really saw either in an all-hero, I mean he's vital in an all-hero Rohirrim army because the ability to give back might, but you might also see him in those themey armies when you also see Merry and the like. So how's he changed? He's gone up. He's gone up by, where is he? He's gone up by 5 points. He's a hero of fortitude, so he can take 12. Now he's still fight 4, but remember, no, he is just fight 4. He's not going to be able to go up in fight. So he's fight 4, he's strength 4, he's still defense 6. He's still got 2 attacks, he's still got 2 wounds, he's still got courage 4, but something which bumps him up that hierarchy, he's gone up to where named hero should be. He's gone up to having 3 mites. He's a 3/1/1 hero. That suddenly makes him viable, you know. Where they really fell away before was the fact that they only brought 2 mites to the table. You know, sure, fight 4 isn't ideal, but you've got to think about what you're really using Gamling for. Gamling you're not using for that, you're using him because of the Royal Standard of Rohan. Because it's a banner, the fact that it's a banner which is protected by the fact that it's on a hero, so theoretically harder to kill. Sure, you can't pass it on, which is can be a bit of a trap, but particularly in a game where so many of the new scenarios reward you for having a banner, that becomes a bit of a key thing. So he's armed with heavy armor and a sword. He's as heroic actions, he's got heroic march and heroic defense. I like heroic defense on him. I really like heroic defense because he's not necessarily going to be winning many fights. You know, he really isn't. The Royal Standard of Rohan is still 50 points, and it was 50 points before, I believe. And he's got access to a horse, of course you're going to put him on a horse. Now the Royal Standard of Rohan is passive. This precious heirloom is a banner, so you're getting that reroll. Remember, this is a banner that is affecting everyone. It's not just affecting, you know, with Erkenbrand's rule, just the ones that you paid the points for to become Westfold Red Shields. Additionally, any Rohan heroes that are within 3 inches of the Royal Standard at the start of any turn and have no might remaining automatically add 1 point of might to their store, which is cool. This cannot take a hero's might beyond its starting level. Gamling suffers no penalties for carrying the Royal Standard Rohan. That's good, so there's no -1 on him there, which is really useful. So I like that. I think the subtle change of him going up to having 3 might, the fact that he's got heroic defense is going to be pretty useful for protecting that banner. But more importantly, the fact that he is he's going to be really useful in scenario play, and he's able to give you might back when you're out are so key for Rohirrim. So that's Gamling. He's got Expert Rider, Horse Lord. He's also got Swarm Protector Theoden. So effectively, he's bodyguard. He's got, you know, he can pass any courage test that he needs to make as long as Theoden's alive. We move on to Hama, Captain of Rohan, who has also gone up in points. I did see him just a second ago. Hama, where have you gone? Oh, first page. So he's gone up by 5 points. He's also a Hero of Fortitude, so he can take 12, just like previously. All of his stats are exactly the same, apart from his heroic stats. So his heroic stats, he goes up to, again, having 3 might, becomes relevant in the Rohan list instantly, but also having 1 fate as well, so he's a bit more survivable. Before he had 0 fate and 2 wounds, you know. Defense 6, he's definitely going down. Now he's defense 6 here, but he's also got access to a shield, so he can go up to defense 7. Again, makes him relevant. He's only fight 4, but you've got the access to heroic defense, so you can protect him if you need to. And he's also got access to the horse. He's Expert Rider, Horse Lord, Swarm Protector Theoden. He is a relatively cheap way of getting 3 might onto the field. So are we going to see more of him? Because he's a bit more survivable, access to defense 7, the fate point, heroic defense options. I think that we will see more Hama. I'm not sure how much he pushes himself up, but he is cheap. He is cheap. He's cheap for that 3 mites. So a much better Hammer going forward. Next up we come to Grimbold. Again, big changes with Grimbold. He's gone up by 5 points. He has also gone up to fight 5. Great change, great change. I'm disappointed to see that he doesn't have a horse option here. I think all Rohan heroes should have access to a horse. I understand why he's not. He's a Hero of Fortitude though. I say he has gone up 5 points, and importantly, he's also gone up by 1 might. Important, relevant, not just a captain, not just a slightly more expensive captain. Remember, he's got a 2-handed axe, he's got heroic strength as well, so he can be a bit of a killer. And options, if your army includes Grimbold, you may upgrade any warriors of Rohan to Helmingers for a cost of 1 point per model. Helmingers are strength 4 rather than 3. Now what's really interesting here, and I'm not sure, it probably is it's probably a mistake or an oversight, maybe it's not. It's not going to break the game, so I'm not sure it needs to be something which is changed. But normally now, when you have to pay point upgrades, that come along in hero profiles, it's just affecting models in their warband. Grimbolds actually can be army wide, which I think is fine, to be honest. It's not going to break the game. Warriors of Rohan are not fantastic, even when they're Helmingers at strength 4. So I think it might be something that stays the same. He's got access to Mighty Blow as a special rule, so he's going to be a killer. He can put the hurt on. If you are taking an infantry Rohan army, then he's going to be a bit of a beast. Do I think that we're going to see a lot of him? No, because I think that we are mainly going to see all mounted Rohan armies. Particularly sort of with Theoden and the like, and a lot of the buffs are to do with if you're mounted, +1 strength if you're mounted model charges and all that kind of thing. Let me just check that actually. I'm pretty sure it says, yeah, friendly Rohan cavalry models. So yeah, because a lot of the army buffs are buffing cavalry, as it should be, rewarding you to take a Themi Rohirrim army that's cavalry based. I think we're going to see more of that. Eowyn the Young, big changes for Eowyn the Young, which there needed to be, because he was very good for his points. He was 90 points before, he's gone up to 115. He is a Hero of Valor, can take 15 troops, which is pretty good. His base stat line, of course they've worked in what was FAQ'd, so he's got his defense 7 written in there, which had to be FAQ'd before, but everything else is the same. Now the key thing here is that if your force contains Elder Young and any other named hero models from your Rohan army list, it will automatically lose its army bonus. Makes sense, rewarding you for taking theme, not just theme in terms of where you are, but when you are, which is cool. Also, if your army includes Eowyn, then every alliance will be impossible allies. One exception would be Minas Tirith, so long as Minas Tirith force also includes no named hero models. Makes sense, makes absolute sense. War gear wise, he is the same. he has got heavy armour, sword, shield, throwing spears, and Felaroth. And Felaroth is an armoured horse with a move of 12, which is what he was before. Very cool. Now the heroic actions he's got heroic resolve, so he can protect himself against magic. He's got heroic strike, which is going to be great for Rohan heroes, as I mentioned before. Heroic strength if he needs it, so he's able to put a bit more hurt on. He's also got heroic defense, so in an Eowyn the Young army he is probably going to be your leader. And I imagine there are times where he's going to be in a situation where we want to keep him safe to deny enemy VPs. So heroic defense is going to be key for that. Now special rules, he is expert rider and horse lord, as you'd imagine. Horse lord is something that you would probably use on him again because you want to get him in. And he's got legendary hero. Now legendary hero is the first time that Eowyn the Young expends a point of might, roll a d6. On a 4+, the might point is might is free and does not reduce Eowyn's store of might. So he is limited to the first time. Previously, it was you could choose which one he does that. So it is a bit more limited. So Eowyn the Young got worse, and he got worse because he's more expensive, because you can't choose that. But what he does do is, when we get to Sons of Ale, he makes Sons of Ale what they are now. And that's the kind of army that you're going to see him. You're not going to see him in a normal Rohan army now, because you're going to lose its army bonus, and that's just not, it's just not worth it. What's the point, right? What's the point? So yeah, we're probably going to see Eowyn the Young in themed Sons of Ale armies. You know, and I'm going to keep mine for that reason, because I think it'd be quite cool. I think it'd be pretty good at low points levels. Actually, I don't think it's going to be great at higher points levels, but at a low points level, I think that army actually does okay in the in the current edition of the game. Okay, so the next one we've got the King's Huntsman. The King's Huntsman, he's a minor hero now. He was an independent hero before, so King's Huntsman can lead troops. So a little bit better in that regard. Still 50 points. I believe his stat line is exactly the same. Yes. He is armor, sword, and longbow, and he's got heroic accuracy, which is what you'd expect from the King's Huntsman as an extra heroic action. His special rule, Master Archer. The King's Huntsman only fail in the way rolls of a 1, which is the same. Additionally, each time this model slays an enemy hero or monster model, restore the King's Huntsman's might to a starting level. Exactly the same. So King's Huntsman exactly the same. Again, I would have liked to see a King's Huntsman have the option for a horse, because I just think all Rohirrim models should have access to a horse. You know, so some cool conversion. I think if he had access to a horse, I think I'd bring him with a particular type of Rohan army. But as it stands, probably not. Captain of Rohan. Captains of Rohan have got significantly better, and let me talk you through why. They are heroes of fortitude, so they can still take 12 troops, which is good, and they're 45 points still. Their big downfall previously was that they were fight 4, so let's remember that. They're still fight 4, they've still got all the same stats across the board. Now, they are listed as armour and sword or axe, so the access to an axe without having to pay points is pretty cool and useful, and they can heroic march, which, you know, you're probably going to use for a 2-attack hero. You're not going to be using it as much for the heroic combat side of things. You are going to use it to get to places or do things first most of the time. They've got the option for the horse, which is still 10 points, the bow, heavy armour, shield, throwing spears. Most of the time when you see this guy, he's probably going to have horse, heavy armour and shield as a base. So he's probably going to be a 65 point hero. He's an expert rider still, and he also gets the Horse Lord special rule, which they all do. But that's not where the Captain of Rohan has got significantly better. This is where it is. Now remember, if it's a pure Rohan army, it goes up to strength 5 on the charge, but check out this, and it's not the first, it's not the only profile, it's just the first profile that we see with this rule, which is one of the rules which makes, well, is the rule I think, that makes Theoden a must take. If this model is within 12 inches of Theoden and has the cavalry keyword, then a model with this special rule receives a +1 bonus to their fight value on a turn in which they charge. So a Rohan captain charges, he is fight 5, strength 5. And there you go. That's why you take Theoden, because of that type of thing. Now, do I think that we're going to see Captains of Rohan? Yes. Well, you're definitely going to see Captains of Rohan if somebody wants to take an Ale, the young Sons of Ale based force. They're not going to benefit from that special rule there, though, so do bear that in mind. But they are still going to get the +1 strength, so that's not too bad. So they basically become Sons of Ale, you know, Sons of Ale who are defense 7 with the heroic stats, which is fun. But I actually think that we will see Captains of Rohan a little bit more because of this. You know, they're pretty good. They're cheap. 65 points is cheap. I'm not sure, like, at that point, if you're taking that type of force, then Hammer becomes, you know, a good shout because of the 3 might points and the like, and gambling. They kind of trump Captains of Rohan ever so slightly, but I've already written lists that involve Captains of Rohan because they are much better. The Warrior of Rohan, not changed at all. They are one of the baseline stats, I suppose, when people were looking to kind of, I guess, build other profiles. The Warrior of Rohan is pretty much your standard man profile. Nothing in there changes apart from the fact that the Warhorn is now 30 points, not 20. The banner obviously still 25 points. Throwing spear still 2 points. Bow and shield are still 1 point each. Okay, so Warriors of Rohan, are we going to see them? Unless you're doing like Helm's Deep based force or you want to go down the Grimbold route, probably not. Big changes coming up now. Big changes. Riders of Rohan. So remember, the Rider of Rohan is the profile, I guess, that should make up the majority of your Rohirrim army, and I would say that unless you went far, like a lot heavier on the Sons of Ale kind of side of things, that was the case, except they would almost certainly be Westfold Red Shields and upgraded, so they were 14 points but fight 4. Now the Rider of Rohan now, and the big reason for that, by the way, if you were bringing them, is because mainly the abuse of the bow limit. 100% bows is huge. Riders of Rohan are now 14 points base, but their stat line stays the same. They're fight 3, 4+ shoot value, strength 3, defense 5, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage streaks. They are more expensive. Do remember that in their war gear they've got armor. They're listed having a sword or an axe. They've got access to the axe, which, you know, can be really useful. They've got access to that. I'm going to have to change over my battery any second, so might have to bear with me if this turns off. And they've got the bow and the horse. Options, Warhorn, again 30. Okay, as long as I don't talk for another 122 minutes, 2 hours, then I think we're alright. Don't expect all of the army reviews to be this long, by the way. It's this long because it's me talking about something that I love and like to talk about. And I hope you like listening. Okay, so let's get back onto Riders of Rohan. Of course, they can take throwing spears, they can take a banner for 25 points as well. They've got Expert Rider, as they did before, and then they've got this new special rule, which I guess this is what they're paying the extra point for. So they've got Arise Riders of Theoden. If this model is within 12 inches of Theoden and has the cavalry keyword, then a model with this special rule receives a +1 bonus to their fight value on a turn in which they charge. So that then becomes your Rider of Rohan access to strength, to fight 4, which is something that I guess I always talked about. Within 12 inches as well, it's a really good range, and it's that rule that we just saw with the captain as well that certainly makes him worth taking. Theoden really worth taking, as well as being, you know, obviously a bit more of a beast these days. Now what's really interesting is, you would think that me looking at this, that I would think, right, well, I've got my Westfold Red Shield on the turn that I charge. Remember, the turns that you charge, I mean, you know, they are important, but you are going to lose threat move-offs. You are going to get counter-charged. Being fight 3-1 attack is an absolute killer. Now, the great thing about the Westfold Red Shield upgrade previously was, of course, you were fight for all the time. I do like the fact that you're getting rewarded for the charge. The fact that the Westfold Red Shield upgrade now only affects 12 and is only a 3-inch banner. Let's say, for example, Westfold Red Shield upgrade had stayed as it was previously. I think that Erkenbrand becomes a must, because you've got an opportunity there to be a fight 4 Westfold Red Shield base and goes up to fight 5 on the charge if you've got Theoden in the army. and then you're still pretty relevant, even at kind of 14 points. Now the reason why the Rider of Rohan falls down a little bit is that unless you are purely going on the purely going for the kind of the skirmish side of things, you've got a better option right underneath you for what the army is now trying to do. Okay, and I think that this would be different if there was also a banner effect again, maybe with Theoden and the like, in the same way that Prince Imrahil's got it. I think even if it just affected riders or whatever it might be, but the fact that you're paying 14 points for a model which isn't going to be fight for all the time. Yes, you got 100% bows there, but it's pretty risky considering how important Fight 4 is across the board. And then you look below, and what we see when we look at the profile below is what I believe will be the new meta, as it were, if you're looking at it purely from a Rohirrim point of view. So the type of army that I think that we're going to see do well with Rohirrim going forward is probably going to be the Rohan Royal Guard below. Now Rohan Royal Guard are 10 points like they were before, and they're the same stat line: fight 4, 4+ shoot value, strength 3, defense 6, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. Pretty staple and standard. A lot of people previously thought, yes, they had bodyguard in there. A lot of people before thought 10 points was maybe a touch expensive when you compared it to other similar-ish kind of profiles for what you got. Where these guys really have got their buff, and it seems like there are 2 areas where they've got their buff. So they're not paying more for the Arise Rise of Theoden. So they're also going to get, when they're cavalry, they're also going to get, when they charge, +1 bonus. So you've got Fight 5 Royal Guard when they're cavalry, when they're charging. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. Like an absolute big deal for a model which can't rely, like a Son of Ale relies, on the number of dice it's rolling to win the fight, because you're only you're getting 2, which is still all right, but a lot of the time you're going up against shield lines. Against other Fight 4, if against a Fight 4 shield line, it's 50-50 pretty much, which isn't great unless you've got banner supporting. Against elves, it's not going in your favour. All of a sudden, that going up to Fight 5 on the charge is amazing, but what makes it especially amazing is that a horse is now 5 points for a Royal Guard. It's a 1 point change. They were 6 points previously, but that means that a Rohan Royal Guard on a horse is 15 points. That's 1 point more than a Rider of Rohan for a Fight 4 base, defense 6, bodyguarded model that is going to charge what you want it to charge, that when within 12 inches of Theoden goes +1 fight and goes Fight 5, and because of your army bonus goes up to strength 4. Royal Guard are the dudes. They are the dudes. I've already started counting how many I've got, and I think I've got 9. 9 isn't going to be enough. I need 30 plus Royal Guard. And to go back to the old days of these videos, if anybody would like to send me any Royal Guard foot and mounted, preferably unpainted, I'll happily take them, because they are going to be great. 15 points for potentially a Fight 5, Strength 4, bodyguarded, Defense 6 cavalry model is just going to be huge. And it's that makes the Rider of Rohan less good. Now don't get me wrong, it's a completely different playstyle, but if you're talking about the playstyle that people have been wanting when they play with Rohirrim, I guess previously they would have to do the Sons of Ale thing. They would have to do the Sons of Ale if they want to try and play Rohan like that, and even then it wouldn't always pay off. Royal Guard allow you to do that. You can do that with Royal Guard now. So you can take an army which is seemingly thematic with Theoden. You've probably got Gamling, so you've got the banner effect in there and protected banner, and you're packing out Royal Guard, and you've got another hero as well for the extra might, and that's a solid army. A mounted Royal Guard army with Theoden. And probably Gamling is a solid army, and that's likely where I think that we're going to see the Rohirrim going forward. You might see situations where you've got Rider Rohan armies where you've also got Erkenbrand in there, for the banners and the like. That's going to be it's still going to be a skirmishy army. because you're not going to have the confidence to do the charging in that you might have done when you had Westfold Red Shield upgrade as it was previously. You know, and I don't think you're necessarily going to do that now anyway. So yeah, really interesting, and a massive shift in the emphasis of what you take when you are playing with the Horse Lords. Do I like that change? The only thing I do, because I like Rohan Royal Guard, I like what you're going to be doing with them. The only thing I don't like is the fact that they are now clearly, for 1 point more, so much more palatable than a rider of Rohan. You still want to see, and don't get me wrong, you might see it where people, I mean, I might find it when I start playing it initially and I'm like, actually these guys on their own aren't cutting it. I need the flexibility of being able to still do the shooting, do the skirmishing, to do what I did before. I might find that, but there is a massive temptation just to go all out Royal Guard, because it's going to be fun and it's going to be pretty effective on the charge. Like, you're going to kill some stuff. You really are going to kill some stuff. Fight 5, strength 4. You know, going up from strength. Their main weakness before was the fact that they were, in my opinion, was that they were a strength 3 model. Getting the work done wasn't great. Now a lot of people have been asking, you know, do you take throwing spears? Now throwing spears are undoubtedly better these days than they were. You're not going to get the penalty when you charge in. I'm still not sure that I would stake my whole game plan around, you know, half of my models hitting and then likely against the defence 5 that we might see a lot of. Sure, you got 5s to hit. You know, you're not going to be doing it. You might get your points back against the defence 3 or 5 army. You're probably not going to get your points back against other stuff. But I would definitely, if I have some points spare, I would put them towards throwing spears now. Whereas previously what I would do is I would try and shift things so I could upgrade having a Royal Guard into being a Son of Ale. Now I'm probably not going to do that. Now I'll look at it and go, alright, well actually I'll put a few throwing spears in there. So yeah, really interesting. The age of the Royal Guard, Rohan Royal Guard, has begun. The Rohan Outrider. Now the Rohan Outrider has gone up by 1 point, as it should have done. Previously there was absolutely zero reason why you would ever take a Warrior of Rohan with a bow, because a Warrior of Rohan with a bow at 7 points was exactly the same as a Rohan Outrider on foot, and a Rohan Outrider on foot had a better shoot value, was better all round, better better special rules. Yeah. Now a Rohan Outrider at 8 points, obviously then with a horse, is 13 points, and before their horse was 6 points. So if you mount them, they're the same price as what they were before. I think that Rohan Outriders, I think we're going to see a few more Rohan Outriders, because you'll see more Royal Guard, and as a result of seeing more Royal Guard, that gives you the option from a bow limit perspective to bring Outriders. And I certainly think that if I was going to bring a few things to kind of hold on to objectives, that Outriders would be key. Their horse is 5 points, so mounted they're the same price as they were before. They've got armour, sword and bow, and their Vanguard special rule stays the same. Okay, so Outriders are a little bit more expensive when they're on foot, which makes massive sense, but their horse is a bit cheaper, so when they're mounted they are where they should be. A 14-point Outrider isn't worth it. A 13-point Outrider is still pretty decent. Okay, next up we come to the Sons of Ale. Now the Sons of Ale have taken a bit of a battering, and perhaps as they should. They did really negate a lot of the weaknesses of being cavalry. Like I say, when you lose, you know, not only are they great at doing the killing, which they should be, but they were pretty good at holding their own when you got countercharged. They are now 20 points, so a little bit cheaper. And they still fight for strength 4, defense 6. They've got 1 wound and courage 4, but they've gone down from having 2 attacks to 1 attack. Now the 2 attacks before was one of the things that made it a little bit more forgiving if you lost. You can still roll 2 dice, you know, to try and win the fight, try and protect yourself. They've got heavy armour, axe, shield and an armoured horse as before. And they've got expert ride. Now bearing in mind that they don't have a pure blood steed now, so they don't have the 12-inch movement steed. That's a big deal. So yeah, they've got an armoured horse, but they can't move 12 inches. Not as good, not as good. Expert rider. And then they've got Riders of Ale. Whilst within 6 inches of Ale the Young, Sons of Ale gain a bonus of +1 to their attack value. And again, this is where we're going to see them. You are probably not going to see, like, why would you? Why would you take a Son of Ale in a normal Rohan army when you've got Royal Guard? When you've got Mounted Royal Guard getting +1 strength, you know, +1 fight, they could be fight 5, you know, they've still got the defense 6, they're bodyguards, they're charging whatever they want, you know. For 5 points more, why would you take something which, you know, is losing a bunch of that? You're gaining an armoured horse, and that's it. That's all you're gaining. Strength 4 when you've lost charge. Sure, you can go up to strength 5. That's fine. That's fine. But I'm not that bothered because you're rolling a bunch of dice when you're cavalry. Strength 3 isn't a problem really when you're rolling as many dice as you are when you're cavalry. So Riders of Ale, whilst within 6 inches of Ale, Sons of Ale gain that bonus of +1 to their attack value. There you have it. That's what you're going to see. And because it's within 6 inches, that means that again, I do think that that's what we'll see. If you see Sons of Ale, it'll be at smaller points cost. Then at 20 points, I say that Ale's more expensive. You know, you might see situations where you've got Rohan captain, some Sons of Ale, Ale the Young, and to be fair, at even smaller points cost, it might just be Ale the Young and a bunch of Sons of Ale. It'll be fun. I'm not sure how good it'll be, but it'll be fun. They're going to be wanting to be around Ale anyway because they want to be within 6 inches for heroic move-offs and the like. So they just go back to where they were before, but a bit cheaper, which kind of makes up for his increase in points. So yeah, I guess you'll still see those kind of similar lists. So there we go. That is the review of the Rohirrim army list. So let's talk about it in general. I've mentioned it a few times there. You know, I've talked through the history of Rohan in SBG and what its strengths were and its weaknesses. I think that Rohan generally is better because magic is worse, because hurl is worse. But it's also better. It's got a decent army bonus, so it rewards you for bringing things together. I think that all of its heroes have come up in some way, shape or form. I think that the armies that we're going to see are going to be very different. We're not going to see anywhere near as much Erkenbrand. We're going to see a lot more Theoden, and troops wise we're going to see a lot of Royal Guard. That is the way that Rohan is going. And if I was going to start off building lists, if I was looking at a 500-600 point list, I would almost certainly be starting, if I was trying to build I guess an all-mounted Rohan army that benefits from all of its current rules and synergies, you're probably going for Theoden. Gambling with the banner if you want to and want to afford it. You might decide that instead of going for gambling with the banner, that you stick a banner on a Royal Guard and go for some of the cheaper 3-might heroes. You might still have gambling, and you might have Harmer in there, which is quite a themey force if you think about it. Royal Guard, gambling, Harmer, and Theoden. Or you might get someone who's like, well, actually I'm going to take the banner because that's going to give me the recurring might. I don't think you necessarily need that at the lower points levels. 9 mites should just about cut it, I think, at 500-600 points, but it is going to be like that. Your opponents are probably going to have about the same, maybe even a little bit more, maybe going up to that kind of 12 might mark. So gambling can protect against that, which is interesting. The good thing about having a banner not on gambling, I suppose, is that you can make sure that it's getting passed around if a Royal Guard does die. But gambling kind of keeps it a bit safer. Remember, he does have the heroic defense as well. So I think that that's probably the way that you're going to see it going forwards. As you start to get to bigger points levels, you start getting in your Eowyn as your third hero if you can, or maybe even Theodred if you can't quite fit in Eowyn, because Theodred can still do the same kind of work, I think. And I think that the other style that you're probably going to see with the Rohirrim going forwards is, I think that there's a lot of merit in the all-hero Rohan army as well, because they've all got that buff that they are going to be strength 5, most of them, when they're charging, so they're going to be getting their work done a lot better. I think heroes in the new edition are much better anyway. what they can do. I think that they've got some decent heroics, and they've got a decent mixture of heroics to counter some of the threats that they're going to see out there. There are plenty of them that have got access to heroic strike. The ones that need to stay alive have got things like heroic defense. Heroic march they've got access to as well for grabbing objectives or getting in the face of their opponents. I actually think it's a really well-rounded group of heroes that I think would work very, very well at particularly kind of at higher points levels, and I think that that's something that I'm going to play with, especially because I can't see myself painting 32 Royal Guard anytime soon. I'm happy with all the changes. I'm happy with most of them. And I hope that you're happy with them too, and I hope that you're looking forward to playing Rohan, because it's an incredibly rewarding army to play with, because it's not an easy entry level army to play with cavalry. So do feel free to look back over the video for those little hints and tips, particularly at the beginning of the video, how to get the most out of your cavalry force. We are going to see less skirmishy Rohan now, which I guess is what everybody wanted. I guess everybody wanted to see a Rohan that could charge into something and hold its own when it managed to charge. And I think that a lot of the Rohan games, I mean, they come down to this anyway, but a lot of the Rohan games and the success of the Rohirrim going forward is very much going to come down to just how much damage you can do on that initial charge, and then whether you win that subsequent roll-off. And I still think that there is a place in making sure that you're reasonably wary and you're not committing everything into that first charge, and you're also protecting against the possibility that you might actually lose the heroic move off that comes next. If you can do enough damage on those first couple of charges, then I think that Rohan are strong. Rohan are strong going forward. So if you would like to see more army reviews, get in the comments below. Like I said, they're not all going to be as long as this. I wanted to do this one on my own because we've not been getting a huge amount of content on the GBHL podcast. We want to get more content out there for you guys with the new edition of the game. We really, really appreciate the fact that you've all stuck by us over the quiet times. Obviously, we've got lots of things going on in real life that make it incredibly hard to film and edit content, but stick with us because we are going to be making some more going forwards. So I guess there's only one thing to say. Don't forget to comment, like, share and subscribe. Remember, you can support your Hobbit host by checking the links in the video description below. That includes going and checking out the fabulous new magazine, SBG magazine. What do you call a new magazine? What is it? New edition? No, I've got edition in my mind. It's very late right now. It's like midnight. New. Who knows? Who knows? But go and check that out anyway. Make sure you just email howdoipay to sbgmagazine@gmail.com. Remember, you can support myself as well if you are buying your Lord of the Rings Middle-earth strategy battle gaming products. I do have an affiliate link over on Hotgates Gaming, which gives you 20% off and some extra store credit. So go and check that out. That does help me out, particularly sort of in terms of getting more filming equipment going forwards and the like. Support your hobby, guys. That's what it's all about. And happy strategy battle gaming.